A little bit of a lengthy process. It's
Yeah.
definitely worth it in the end.
Oh my God, look at the layers. Look at how good it is. Hi everyone, I'm Saffitz. Welcome to my home kitchen. Today I'm making a recipe that is as difficult to pronounce as it is to make. It is called Kouign-Amann. It is maybe the most delicious pastry I can think of that I've ever had. It's so delicious. It is laminated like a croissant, but it's caramelized and it does take a lot of steps, but in my dedication to bringing you recipes, both complicated and easy, this one leans complicated, but I'm really excited to make it. So Kouign-Amann is it's a very butter forward recipe. It is a type of pastry that is laminated. So this is similar to like a Danish, a croissant, where you get that layered effect. And that layered effect is the result of folding together, like rolling out and folding together butter and dough. And as you roll, the layers thin out, you fold, the layers multiply, and you get this separating effect and these like beautiful layers. I will say, yes, the process is sort of complex for making Kouign-Amann, but the ingredients are really, really straightforward. So I'm gonna go through them. I have some all-purpose flour, sugar. I have a teaspoon of instant yeast. You could also use active dry, kosher salt, unsalted butter. Then I also have additional unsalted butter for the pans. And then importantly, this is 3 sticks of salted butter. That's what's going to get laminated into the dough. This?
No.
This? Oh, sorry. This is just additional sugar for preparing the pans. So same thing. I'm going to use a stand mixer to make the dough. It is actually quite mixable by hand, so just keep that in mind. And then I have 2 muffin pans. So 2 12-cup muffin pans. This recipe makes 24. They're actually called Kouign-Amann, meaning like mini Kouign-Amann. So actually Kouign-Amann traditionally is like one sort of like larger pastry, and I'm making mini ones, so they fit in muffin tins. If you only have one and you don't want to buy a second muffin pan, I can talk about how to still make 24 using one pan. I have a couple other little pieces of equipment you'll need. A rolling pin, definitely. A wheel cutter is good for cutting the dough. Parchment paper, offset spatula, pretty straightforward. Before I show you my Kouign-Amann recipe, I want to thank our friends at Kerrygold for sponsoring this episode. Kerrygold is the maker of salted and unsalted butter. All of the butter is made from milk from cows that graze on grass on small family-owned farms in Ireland. I love it for Kouign-Amann because it's so smooth and creamy. It laminates into pastry beautifully. You get incredible layers, plus that pure butter flavor. It's also my butter that I use in all of my baking, but also just in everyday life. I use it for cooking eggs, for putting on toast, pretty much everything. I just love the pure butter flavor. It's high fat, so smooth and creamy, and it's gonna make the most buttery, shattering, flaky Kouign-Amann. I can't wait to show you. So thank you to Kerrygold, and now I'm gonna show you the recipe. So the first step of the recipe, fortunately, is an easy one, and it's making the dough. Like I said, you could do this by hand. I'm gonna do it in a stand mixer because it's just very quick and easy. So I'm gonna start by just combining all of my ingredients in the bowl of the mixer. So I have my all-purpose flour. I also have some extra flour here, which I might need to add to the dough, and I'm also gonna use it later as bench flour for rolling. So I have kosher salt, my teaspoon of instant yeast, and not to be confused with rapid rise yeast, that's not what you want. Okay, so this is 1.25 cups of granulated sugar. I'm going to use 1/4 cup here, and then the rest of it, the remaining cup, is going to be for rolling out and forming my Kouign-Amann. Then this is 3 tablespoons of unsalted butter. In the book, it calls for melted and cooled, but this has just been sitting at room temperature, so it's kind of the same thing. Then I have 1 cup of room temp water. Again, it's 1 cup. Dough is really easy. It's like put everything in a bowl and mix. I'm going to start on the lowest speed, just like that first click of the mixer. And I'm going to keep it on this speed just until it kind of comes together in like a shaggy ball. And then I'll turn the speed up a little bit, just to the next level, to like a medium low. And we're going to mix until the dough is like very smooth and supple and elastic. And I can add a little bit more flour as needed if it seems like it's sticking a little bit to the sides of the bowl. You want a nice soft dough. and it could maybe be slightly tacky, but you don't want it to be sticky at all. So we're already kind of at that like shaggy ball stage. I'm gonna turn it up one click, and then it needs to mix for maybe like 8 to 10 minutes. So after 4 minutes of mixing maybe, the dough is pulling away from the sides of the bowl. I am gonna give everything a little bit of a scrape just because there's some stuck on parts. We're not done. This needs more mixing. You can see that the dough looks it's like a little textured. And it doesn't quite have the elasticity that we want, but now is a good chance to just kind of clean everything up. And I'm gonna add a little bit of flour, maybe just about a tablespoon. So this is what the dough looks like. It's just a little bit sticky. See how it came off on my hands? So I'm gonna add a little bit of flour, maybe about a tablespoon or so, and then continue to mix. So again, we want this to be really smooth and supple and elastic. So maybe another 5 minutes of mixing. And you can go on that second speed too. So several minutes of mixing. This is done, looking really nice. You can see from the way it kind of like pulls off of the hook that it's nice and elastic. Now with lamination, so the whole point of lamination is this process of like making the dough very thin and then folding and rolling out again. That's just to say that you want a dough that has this mixture of like elasticity and strength, but also some softness to it. So that's what you have here. And I'm going to kind of form this into a ball, just like so. And give it a little bit of flour, just an extra dusting, kind of cover it up a little bit. And we're gonna put it back into the bowl, and this is gonna proof. So we have that yeast in here. That action of the mixer is helping to activate the yeast. It's warming the dough slightly. So this is gonna go back inside the bowl, and I'm gonna cover it. And then what I like to do is actually snap a photo, because sometimes I forget like how big the dough looks when I first put it in the bowl to proof. That'll help you gauge the rise. And you're gonna cover this and let it sit at room temp until it is nearly doubled. And then while this is proofing, I'm gonna make the butter block. It's exactly what it sounds like. It is a block of butter. I'm gonna form it into a square. And this is what gets literally enveloped in the dough. And then it gets rolled out, and that's what makes your lamination and your layers. So I have 3 sticks, 12 ounces of salted butter. This is Kerrygold butter. Anytime I'm doing a laminated recipe, because Kerrygold, unlike a lot of other European butter brands, when it's cold, it still has a pliability, like a term in baking is a plasticity to it. So I can press on it. This is cold straight from the fridge, and it doesn't shatter. It flattens out. And that flattening effect without shattering is super important in laminating. So Kerrygold has long been my butter of choice for anything laminated. Unsalted, because we're making a recipe from Brittany, salted butter is the thing.
It's Brittany, bitch.
I have the butter here kind of in a pile, a piece of parchment paper, and I'm just gonna kind of pile everything, like gather it up in a little packet. So I've kind of made this bundle. Just go ahead and turn it over. And it's kind of fun. I'm gonna beat it with a rolling pin. So the goal here is to get that butter pliable and plastic without having to get it warm first. You just don't want to wrap it tightly enough or hit it hard enough that you're going to break the parchment. Just beware of that. So the pieces are already kind of fusing together, and you want to beat this until it's about 1/2 inch thick. And then I have a small offset spatula here. I'm unwrapping this, and I'm going to use the spatula to help me actually get things into the shape that I ultimately want it to be, so more of a square. So I'm just kind of using this to like press the pieces together in places and also kind of trimming it. Also, one thing I did not call out in the special equipment section, but should have, is a ruler. It's just something like, spend 50 cents on it at like the dollar store or whatever, but it's just something that you will use more than you think if you like to bake. So now I'm going to be a little bit more conscious about forming everything into a square. So I'm going to start to, rather than just kind of scrunching everything up, I'm going to do more of like a folding to create sides. Okay. So same thing, just kind of using the spatula. Now I basically have the butter in the dimensions that I want it. It's forming that square shape, but I need to even it out and make it really sharp. You want a butter block that is basically a perfect square, because the more precise you are at the early stages of lamination, the easier the process is going to be. So I'm going to fold it up as evenly as I can. Give it a little flattening. Okay. And now I'm going to sort of finish forming that packet. So folding up the other sides, fold it sort of like a present. So let's see, where am I here? I'm at just about 7 inches that way, and I want to be 7 inches in this direction. So now you can see I have this packet. I'm going to put it folded sides down, and now I'm going to use the rolling pin. The rolling motion is helping to fill in any air pockets. I just want to continue rolling until I see that the butter has filled in all of any gaps that are in the parchment. As you can see, I'm rolling toward the corners. Okay, but this looks great. So I've basically done my butter block. Here it is. It's 7 inches square. 7 1/4. 7 1/2 on that side. Close enough. As long as it's square. You know, 7 inches is a guideline. As long as it's square, like not 7 inches here and 7 1/2. 7 1/4, 7 1/4, that's fine. Okay. So this is good. It still feels nice and cold. This can hang out in the fridge while you're waiting for the dough. However, I have a sauce that I'm going to bring out, and I'm going to move on to the next step. But here's what you want to do if you're making this at home and you're obviously just following along the recipe. That dough is going to rise between an hour and a half until it's doubled. I would punch it down, kind of form it into a square, stick it in the freezer for 10 minutes, and then I would move on to this step. So here's this dough that I set up overnight. It has just about doubled in size. I'm going to get it out of the bowl. We want the orientation of this dough to be, I'm going to put on some flat flour surface. We want the orientation of this dough to be square. So here's what I'm going to do. You can take a knife, you're going to slash it in an X at 90 degrees. And then that's going to actually help you to get this into more of a square shape. So I'm going to start to roll out this dough. I want it to be a square. And like the exact dimensions aren't important, but it needs to be a square, and it needs to be a little bit bigger than your butter block. It's important to kind of keep it moving on the surface. You don't want any sticking. Here's what we want to do. We want to place this butter block inside this square of dough. And to do so, we're going to orient it like a diamond set inside of a square. So I need to roll this a little bit bigger. Okay. So if this is our square, all right, this is a good size. So I'm going to take my butter block and I'm going to unwrap it, but not fully. I'm going to just unwrap it enough to expose one side. Then I'm going to use the parchment paper to actually help me to orient it. Okay. So then the parchment paper comes off. I'm actually going to save this parchment for later, and you'll see why. So now we want to fold this up or envelop it. So I'm going to start by taking one corner of the dough at a time and bringing it toward the center. And some amount of stretching here is okay because you need to make all the corners meet and all the seams close. So here you can see where the butter's exposed. I'm just going to pinch that together. And this is why you want that square shape, so that you have the four corners meeting in the center and all kind of aligning. So give it nice, firm pinches to seal. If it's not sealing, you might have a little too much flour, so you can just kind of dust it off. It's really important during this process also to just be aware be aware of how the dough is responding. Touch it. Does it feel cool? Is it fighting you? These are all important kind of indicators of how the next step is going to go, which is your first turns. So turns is the term that describes like the number of times you're folding the dough. So I'm giving my surface some flour. So here I have my packet. The first thing I'm going to do, rather than just start to roll it out, is I'm going to actually beat it, similar to that motion that I used for the butter block, but not as firm. I'm going to be a little more gentle. I'm going to start to just, it's almost like a firm tap on the dough. And what this is helping to do, the same thing I did to that butter, is helping to make it pliable, to like flatten it. In this case, it's helping to lengthen the dough. It's helping to close these seams here. So I'm going for a shape that is basically 3 times as long as it is wide. And that's because when I fold it, the whole thing is going to then like go back into like a square, basically. Okay. One thing you also want to keep in mind is that you do want to try to maintain a very square shape. Now I have a wheel cutter here, which I'll show you a trick for if you find that the short sides are rounding, very, very common issue. I'll show you what to do. Here's where I'm going to start just rolling it out with the rolling pin. And you want to kind of use a motion of like pushing away from you and then pulling toward you. And as you can probably tell, what's happening during this step is that butter is flattening out into like a thin sheet. Give it some more flour if you need to. And I like to keep the dough moving on the surface quite a bit. Again, you want to make sure that the dough is actually holding its shape and is not just lengthening because it has friction with the surface. So this looks good. I'm ready to do my first turn or set of folds. But you can see that I have some rounding here at the end. And what I actually have is dough, like a layer of sort of an area where I have dough that doesn't have butter in between it. So you can use your wheel cutter. I just want to trim a little bit. I don't want to get overzealous. But you can see this is just plain dough. There's no butter in between. So that's a perfectly fine thing to trim off. If you cut butter and like you're like, oh no, I see a layer of butter in there, it's no big deal. It gets folded in. Like it becomes an interior. So I'm going to start by folding this into thirds. This is what is termed in baking a letter fold. I'm going to take the bottom of the dough, the bottom third, and fold it up toward, so that's covering the center third of the dough. And then this is also where I take the chance to kind of like form my corners a little bit. Now to complete that fold, I'm going to take that top third down. If you have a lot of flour in here, you're going to want to brush that off because you need the dough to stick to itself. So now I have what's called my packet. And I'm going to try to squeeze in a second turn here. So a second round of rolling and folding. If you feel like the dough, it just feels warm and you're like, I don't know about this, it's not feeling great, stick it in the fridge. So it's that rolling and folding process that is going to form the layers of the pastry. So I put some more flour down. I'm going to move this back onto my work surface, but I have it now oriented as this is called the book. So you see this flap here? That top flap should be on your right. And think about turning the page of a book. It'd be like if you opened it to read it like a book, it would open to your left. Okay, so more flour. One thing you can do to help yourself maintain square edges is like position the rolling pin right at that line at the bottom and then roll away. So this looks good, and you can see that I still have relatively square ends. I still have a little bit of kind of like doughy bits that I can trim off. And now I'm ready to do my second turn, sorry. So bringing that bottom third up. Again, take off any excess flour because you want these layers to stick together. And then we've like worked the dough pretty intensely with all that rolling and folding. This needs to rest. It needs to cool down. The yeast needs to like chill out literally. and the butter needs to firm up and the gluten needs to relax. So I'm gonna get this in some plastic wrap. I like to do a rapid chill in the freezer for 10 minutes. The point is not to freeze it solid, but to drop the temp quickly to control that proof, and then the fridge for an hour. So freezer for 10, fridge for an hour, then the next set of turns with sugar. The dough is chilled, it's rested, I should be able to roll it out. And now I'm gonna do turns 3 and 4, and this time I'm incorporating sugar. So the butter is now firm because it's cold. So I'm going to actually go back in with that same gentle, but like whacking motion. So here's what I would recommend as far as a baking schedule for people. If you're going to make Kouign-Amann and not go crazy with timing, make your dough in the morning. Let it rise in the fridge basically all day. Then do your turns and assembly at night. Get them in the pans, stick them in the fridge, and then bake the next day. That is gonna help you really control the fermentation. It's gonna like make you feel more sane because you're not like, fighting the dough and fighting temperature and everything. So that's what I recommend. You could, however, do it just as I have it written in Dessert Person, which is make the dough, go right into like the butter block and bake all in one day. That's also a possibility. I'm just sort of giving you options for breaking it up. I'm gonna get that orientation back to where I want it with that, flap in place. Now I'm gonna roll it out. Okay, so I'm kind of getting to that point where I have a slab that is kind of that 3 times as long as it is wide. So this is where I incorporate the sugar. I have that remaining 1 cup of sugar for my original ingredient list. And I'm going to literally just fold it into the dough as I make that letter fold. I'm actually gonna flip it over again because I want that seam to be right there. Here's the problem with sugar, and it's why I wait to incorporate it until the final 2 turns. Sugar is hygroscopic. It attracts water. It will pull water from the environment. And the dough has water in it, the butter has water in it. It's kind of one of those final steps. The other thing about sugar is that it's crystalline, and the little bits of sugar have sharp edges, and they will tear through that delicate dough layer. So just know that once you add the sugar, you're on the clock and things are not gonna go as smoothly, but that's okay. So you can see that I mostly sprinkle the sugar in the center. This goes up. Then more sugar now on that newly exposed third that you folded up. And then this comes up and over. So now we're gonna go for our 4th turn. Repeat exactly that same process with the sugar. One important tip is clean off your work surface, because now I have little sugar sprinkles everywhere, and that is going to really tear things up as you try to roll it out. So, and start again with a little more flour. So same thing. I don't really need to beat the dough this time because it's warmed up a little bit and things have softened. And again, that same tip of if it's not really wanting to lengthen, try rolling the other direction. But I think this is sort of where I'm going to get this round. So now same thing, more sugar. Now that remaining 1 cup of sugar that I've been pulling from, that's not an amount specific to the recipe. It's not a guarantee. It's not a guarantee that you're going to use that full cup. It's just an amount that you have to pull from. So just keep that in mind. Here we go. This has gotten, it's not warm, but has come up, it's a little bit more room temp. I want to just get rid of the sugar. Same cooling process, 10 minutes in the freezer, an hour in the fridge. You could give it longer if you feel like things are just really warm. And while that's cooling down, you can prepare your pans. So that's the next step. This is going back into the freezer. So while your dough is chilling, And we're kind of almost at that like assembly step, which is really exciting. We have to prepare the pans. I'll show you what I do. I take a pair of scissors and I cut these long strips of parchment paper. And you need strips that are like, you know, about 1/4 to 1/2 inch wide. And then I'm going to cut them into sort of like 5-inch lengths or so. So you want strips like this. And these are going to get laid into the muffin, each cup, and they're going to stay there and kind of adhere because they're going to be buttered. And you have like a little tab that you can pull on that's going to help you dislodge and unmold your baked Kouign-Amann. I'm just going to, I have a pastry brush here, very handy tool. And you don't need to put like huge amounts of butter, but you just want to get everything well coated. You're going to take your strip, you're going to lay it down into the center and kind of like press it down so it's going to kind of stick because of that butter. You want it to lay flat on the bottom of the cup and then come up the sides. Then you can butter the parchment a little bit. Make sure it really sticks. Okay, and then your sugar, just a light sprinkle of sugar inside each cup. Probably not even a 1/2 teaspoon. But this is going to really help to bring that like caramelized, crunchy exterior to the Kouign-Amann. And that's it. So I'm going to do all 24, cut more strips, and those can just hang out off to the side while you finish everything else. So I know the dough has had plenty of time to chill. It's in the fridge. I know it'll be nice and cold, so I'm going to roll it out. I have my pans that I already prepared, and I'm going to show you how to roll it out and cut. We're basically just going to cut squares, and I'll show you how to form the Kouign-Amann and get them in the pans. We have to roll this out into a pretty big slab. So I have something here that's like 6 by 7, and I want to get it into a nice big thin sheet that measures about 18 by 12. So it kind of takes a lot of like working of the dough to get it into that shape. One thing to note is that when you're doing the turns, the thinner and longer and wider that you're able to get the dough in between turns, the thinner that packet will be once you fold it up, and then the less effort you'll have to make when it goes to rolling it out. So on that 4th turn, that dough was kind of springing back. I wasn't able to get it that thin. So I ended up with like a taller, smaller packet that then I had to just do that much more work at this stage to get it to roll out. But that's all right, I'm just gonna go with it. So I'm about there. I'm like a little shy, but I'm gonna go ahead and cut it. So the idea of getting it into something that's like a 12 by 18 is that I'm gonna cut this in a 6 by 4 grid because I need to make 24 squares because I have my 2 muffin pans. So I'm gonna start by giving it a little trim around the sides and edges. And now I'm gonna cut this into 4 by 6. So you can start, I'll start at the shorter ends, which are gonna go into 4. See how the dough is kind of like pulling? It just did not really want to extend for me. 4 lengthwise, and then 6 crosswise. I'm gonna do my best size estimate. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start to form the queenette, as they're called, the mini Kouign-Amann. So I have my sugar here. I'm gonna get a bunch of it on the work surface. And I'm also just gonna sprinkle it over the dough. So now I'm going to take 1 square at a time and kind of further coat it in sugar. And it doesn't like, it's, you know, the dough has been floured. So it's not like it's adhering so much. And then because my dough is a little bit springy, I'm just sort of like patting down the square. I'm getting lots of nice sugar in it. And then what you want to do is you want to take the 4 corners and fold them inward toward the center, like so. And then I like to go in with my fingers and kind of like firmly press so that they kind of stay where they are. And then that's your queenette, and then that goes into one of your cups in your muffin tin. All right? So I'm just going to keep going until I formed all of them and they're all set up in my muffin pans. Here I have my pans. So these need to proof. So you have 2 options. You can cover them and let them proof at room temp and then bake them, so they'll be ready in like an hour. Or you can put them in the fridge and let them have a nice, long, slow, cold proof, which I like for a couple of reasons. One is it actually improves flavor. Two is it keeps the butter cold. And there's always a risk at room temp that like maybe your kitchen gets a little warm and the butter starts to ooze out, and then you don't get as nice of a final result. So I am going to put these in the fridge, and I actually have a batch of Kouign-Amann that I made last night and has been cold proofing. So I'm going to bake off those, and so I'll pull those out. And in the meantime, I want to get my oven preheating to 350, and make sure you have a rack in the upper third and lower third because we're going to bake them together. If you have one muffin tin, you're like, I'm not getting a second one for this project, go ahead and fill one, just as I did here. And then with your 12 other squares, just go ahead and put the squares on like a cutting board or just like a flat plate and cover them and put those in the fridge, and you can bake them in stages. These are going to go into my oven because they proofed overnight in the fridge. I don't have to let them sit at a room temperature. They can go cold right from the fridge into the oven. These are going to bake for 25 to 30 minutes, and I'll also do a rotation like 2/3 of the way through baking, just so that they bake evenly. So the ones in the bottom rack are going to get more heat onto the bottom of the pan and are going to caramelize faster. So I just want to rotate them so that they bake evenly. And I'm also using light colored pans. That's really important. If you use a darker like nonstick pan, they're going to color a lot faster. So just know that. I set the timer for 20 minutes. So that's about 2/3 of the way through baking. You don't want to rotate them too early because you need a chance for the yeast to like activate and get everything to rise and start to set. So then I'll rotate the pans top to bottom, side to side, and then they'll go until they're nice and golden brown or cheese. Okay, so that's the 20-minute timer. I'm going to rotate pans. I'm going to switch the top and bottom and also give them a 180 spin. It smells so good. It smells like caramelizing sugar and yeast and dough, and it smells amazing. Okay. Oh my God, they look so good. Do you know what though? They need a little bit of a press. Hold on. Sometimes they just need a little press in the middle so they maintain that folded shape. But okay, these are going to go back in. So these are back in the oven, and I just want them to go until they're like nice and golden brown all over. You should be able to see some caramelizing around the sides as well. And I did that little poke because they puffed up so much, and I want them to maintain that folded shape. So I don't want them just to be like, you know, like layered muffins basically. So another 5 to 10 minutes and we'll pull them out. It has been 28 minutes. They smell incredible. They're nice and golden brown. I'm going to pull them out. So you can see that puffing in the center. So now they're obviously very hot. They're straight out of the oven. But there is also like this layer of caramel around the bottom. And if I were to let these cool completely in the tins, there's a risk of sticking. So this is the whole purpose of why we put our little parchment strips in, to help us dislodge and unmold the Kouign-Amann from the pan. So I'm going to start to actually take them out. You don't want to do it like literally the second they come out of the oven because they're pretty delicate and they need to have a chance to set up a little bit. But after a minute or two, what you should be able to do is just sort of like tug on the parchment and they'll come out. And so I actually like to cool them upside down, and you can see how beautiful and caramelized that surface is. It looks so good. I would say let them sit for at least a half an hour before you enjoy. I'm very excited, a little hungry. It's time to eat these. They're fully cooled. And another reason you want to let them cool is because that caramel shell kind of hardens. So when I tap on it, it's like, it gives you that crunch, which is so good. I also kind of like the size because there's a very rich pastry, and I kind of think it's the perfect size. So I'm going to pick, I kind of like the short ones because they're like a little bit more caramelized. So I'm going to taste one. So you can see also, look at all the layers. Can you see that? Great layer separation. I love seeing that kind of crystally sugar on top also. They're just perfect. Oh, they look so good. So beautiful. I kind of want to cut one in half so you can sort of see how the separation happens internally. You can see, like, look at the cutting board. See how it shatters, like the way a croissant shatters? There's a lot of moisture inside the Kouign-Amann because of that sugar, and because that sugar pulls moisture, it doesn't dry out. But you still get that beautiful layer separation where you could like peel the layers off. It looks so good. They're insanely good. So buttery. Like, and I don't mean buttery like if you squeezed it, butter would drip out, because it wouldn't. But the pure butter flavor, incredible texture and incredible flavor. It's so good. You can hear how crunchy it is. I love like that. See that layer separation? So that thin dough layer. I'm kind of glad they're so small, because like no matter what size it was, I would eat the whole thing. It's the greatest pastry ever invented. Even if you struggle with the lamination, which is very normal, and you get some tearing and the butter's coming out and like it's a little sticky, keep going, because you might not get like this much definition, but it'll still be so tasty. Like the yeast is still gonna work, the butter is still gonna flavor it, it's gonna be so good. This is amazing. Thanks to all the people from Brittany who over the years invented this recipe, because it is truly the height of what baking can achieve. And it will make your life easier if you get Kerrygold salted butter for the butter block. It's gonna thin out, make it that lamination process that much easier, and gonna give it incredible flavor, just like these. So I feel so accomplished. And now you have 24 of them. It's like incredible. And we're gonna enjoy these. For like the fully written out recipe with lots of explainer photos, see Dessert Person, it's in there as Kouign-Amann. Check out the book in general. And I wanna thank our friends at Kerrygold for sponsoring this episode. And thank you so much for watching. And don't forget to like and subscribe.